Did you know that the average person makes up their mind about someone in just 7 seconds? That's all the time you have to grab your audience's attention when you start a speech. In fact, studies show that a strong opening can increase audience engagement by 400%. But here's the kicker: most people get their speech opener all wrong. If you start your speech with a boring, "Hello, my name is," or a tired quote, you risk losing your audience before you even say anything important. But if you nail that opening, you'll have them hooked from the very first word. In this video, we'll explore the best and worst ways to start a speech. We'll look at shocking statistics, powerful storytelling tips, and how to use pauses and quotes to keep your audience on the edge of their seats. Stick around, because we're about to uncover the secret to making a killer first impression. Chapter 1. The Hook That Roars. Unleashing the power of a killer opener. Starting a speech strong is like catching a fish with the perfect bait. A great opener can draw your audience in, making them eager to hear more. Think of it as setting the tone, like choosing the right first note in a song. Studies show that you have only 7 seconds to grab attention before your audience begins to tune out. That's a tiny window, so every word counts. One powerful strategy is to start with a shocking statistic. For example, when Dr. John Medina, author of Brain Rules, says, "People forget 90% of what you say in 30 minutes, it instantly makes you think, wait, what?" This type of statement creates curiosity and makes the audience wonder, what's next? Similarly, opening with a surprising fact or a bold claim can make your audience sit up and pay attention. Another technique is to start with a bold question. How would you feel if you were told you could triple your productivity in just 1 week? This creates instant curiosity. When you ask questions, you're inviting your listeners to participate mentally, and it sparks an inner dialogue that keeps them engaged. But remember, the key to a successful hook is relevance. Your opener should connect to your speech's main message. If you're giving a talk on health, starting with, "Every year, over 2.8 million Americans die from obesity-related diseases," is a sobering and relevant way to pull people in. The best openers are memorable. Think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous, "I Have a Dream." His opener didn't just connect emotionally, it created a lasting image in everyone's mind. And that's the power of a great opening, it sticks. Chapter 2. Cringe-worthy beginnings. The pitfalls of opening wrong. Now that you know what works, let's talk about what doesn't. We've all been there, cringing at an awkward or overused opener. Starting with "Good morning" and a long-winded introduction may feel polite, but it doesn't create excitement. In fact, it can come across as unoriginal and uninspired. The truth is, if your opener doesn't create an emotional connection right away, your audience will start thinking about what they're having for lunch instead of listening to you. Another mistake is overused quotes. Using the famous, "Ask not what your country can do for you" quote from JFK can feel like a shortcut. Yes, it's iconic, but people have heard it a million times. Audiences want originality, not cliches. The best speeches create fresh experiences, not recycled lines. Humor can be a great way to connect, but it's also risky. If you try to be funny and it falls flat, you risk losing your audience's trust right away. In The Art of Public Speaking, Dale Carnegie advises that humor should always feel natural and not forced. If you feel the need to tell a joke to get attention, make sure it ties into your message. Don't forget about long-winded intros. When you spend too much time talking about yourself or explaining your credentials, you risk losing your audience's attention. Sure, some background information is important, but it shouldn't come at the cost of getting straight to the point. The key here is avoiding dead air. If you start your speech in a way that feels too slow, too boring, or too generic, you won't capture the audience's interest. You need to grab them right away, or you risk them mentally checking out. Chapter 3. The Element of Surprise. Starting with a question that hooks. When you ask a question at the beginning of your speech, you're doing more than just making a statement. You're involving your audience. It's an invitation to think, reflect, or even take a mental action. Research shows that when you ask questions, it activates different areas of the brain. The audience starts to mentally engage in a search for the answer. Think about how Steve Jobs used questions in his speeches. In his iconic Stanford commencement address, he asked, "How can you know what you want if you don't know who you are?" This isn't just a question, it's a challenge that makes the listener stop and think. A question can turn the speech into an interactive experience, rather than a one-sided lecture. According to psychologist Daniel Kahneman, in his book Thinking, Fast and Slow, asking a question that taps into someone's instinctive or emotional side can trigger immediate involvement. Whether it's something like, "Do you ever feel like there's never enough time in the day?" or "What if you could change just one habit to improve your life?" it gets your audience thinking. But timing matters. A question at the right moment can catch people off guard, making them more likely to listen. If you begin with a slow, deliberate question, you're inviting curiosity. Think of it like planting a seed in the audience's mind, then watching them grow eager for the answer. The secret is to make the question open-ended, not one that can be answered with a simple yes or no. A question like, "What would your life look like if you could wake up every day full of energy?" opens the door to countless personal interpretations. It allows your audience to connect on their own level. In fact, The Charisma Myth by Olivia Fox-Cabane shows that asking thoughtful questions not only gets people's attention, but it also makes them view you as a more charismatic speaker. People want to engage with someone who is curious and invites their thoughts. Starting with a question also ties back to the principle of relatability. When your audience feels like they're part of the conversation from the start, they are more likely to stay engaged. The goal is to make them feel personally involved in your speech, not like passive listeners. Whether you're addressing a large group or a small team, using a question as your opener is a simple but effective way to make an immediate impact. It's a strategy that works in virtually every setting, from business presentations to motivational speeches. A good question can also build anticipation for what you're going to say next. The audience is already mentally invested, wondering, what's the speaker going to say to answer that question? That's a powerful place to be as a speaker. In the end, the best speech openers don't just get attention, they engage the mind. So, before you dive into your content, ask yourself, how can you start with a question that pulls your audience in and makes them feel invested in your message from the very beginning? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want more tips on public speaking and personal development. Stay tuned for the next chapters, where we'll explore more strategies for grabbing attention. Chapter 4. Storytelling Mastery. How to begin with a personal tale. People love stories. It's hardwired into our brains. A study from the Neuro Leadership Institute found that stories activate multiple regions in the brain, making them far more memorable than plain facts or statistics. This is why starting your speech with a personal story is one of the best ways to connect with your audience. It humanizes you and creates an emotional link that statistics alone can't. Take Steve Jobs, for example. When he introduced the iPhone, he didn't just talk about the technical specs. He told a story about how Apple had revolutionized the way we use technology. The power of storytelling in speeches is so significant that even the Harvard Business Review points out that storytelling boosts emotional engagement, helping your message stick longer. When you start with a personal tale, it shows vulnerability. People feel more comfortable when they see that you, too, have struggled or experienced something meaningful. For example, when Oprah Winfrey speaks about her childhood challenges, she doesn't just tell facts, she makes you feel her journey. As The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie explains, sharing your personal experiences fosters trust and relatability. Your story doesn't need to be long, but it should be impactful. It should highlight a key moment, a lesson learned, or a turning point. For instance, Michelle Obama's speech at the 2016 Democratic National Convention began with a powerful story about her roots, sharing how growing up on the South Side of Chicago shaped her values. She didn't just talk about her success, but rather, she made her success relatable. One of the best things about using stories is that they stick in the audience's mind. According to the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, people are 22 times more likely to remember a story than a list of facts. This is why speeches that start with an intriguing personal story have a lasting impact. The story you choose should be relevant to the topic of your speech. If you're speaking about resilience, a story of overcoming a setback will work perfectly. Make sure it's tied to your message. The key is not just telling any story, but telling the right story that creates emotional buy-in from your audience. Also, remember the rule of 3 in storytelling. It's a technique often used by great speakers and writers alike. By highlighting 3 key points in your story, you give your audience a clear framework to follow. This helps them process and remember your message. In short, Storytelling is one of the most effective tools in a speaker's toolbox. A personal story builds credibility and connection, and it makes your message much more memorable. Chapter 5. The Rhetorical Golden Ticket. Opening with a quote that hits home. We've all heard the famous lines, "Be the change you wish to see in the world," or, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." While these quotes are iconic, they've been heard so often that they might not pack the punch they used to. The power of a good quote lies in its ability to make the audience feel like they are about to hear something profound. But it's crucial to choose the right quote, one that aligns with your speech and is meaningful in the context. Warren Buffett, one of the world's most respected investors, once said, "The best investment you can make is in yourself." This quote could be the perfect opener for a speech about personal growth or financial literacy. When choosing a quote, think about your theme. A quote should be a shortcut to your message. It's a way to deliver complex ideas in a single sentence. However, using a quote that feels overly generic can hurt your credibility. For instance, quoting Shakespeare may seem intellectual, but unless it directly relates to your speech, it can come across as a lazy way to start. In The Art of Public Speaking, Dale Carnegie suggests that you should only use a quote if it truly enhances your message, not just for the sake of sounding profound. One strategy for using quotes effectively is to connect them to your audience's experiences. For example, if you're speaking to a group of entrepreneurs, a quote by Richard Branson could resonate deeply. "Business opportunities are like buses, there's always another one coming." This makes the quote more than just a line, it becomes a springboard for your speech. Another tip is to choose quotes that challenge the status quo or ask thought-provoking questions. A quote like, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life," by Steve Jobs, encourages people to reflect on their own choices. A quote like this can ignite curiosity and make the audience eager to hear how your speech will unpack such an impactful message. There's also the power of humor. Using a lighthearted or funny quote to break the ice can be very effective. In his book The Charisma Myth, Olivia Fox Cabane explains that humor can relax the audience, helping them feel more comfortable. A well-placed humorous quote can create rapport and set the tone for a more informal, relatable speech. Lastly, don't forget the importance of delivery. The way you deliver a quote can be just as powerful as the words themselves. A well-timed pause before delivering the quote, or emphasizing the key phrase with your voice, can turn an average quote into something unforgettable. Chapter 6. Silence speaks volumes. The power of pausing before you speak. It might sound counterintuitive, but one of the most powerful tools in your speech arsenal is silence. Pausing before you speak can have a greater impact than rushing into your words. In fact, studies show that pauses can increase audience retention by as much as 15%. A well-timed pause builds anticipation and lets your words sink in. A pause before speaking allows the audience to process what you just said, or it creates a sense of curiosity about what will come next. Think of it as letting your audience's minds catch up to your message. Pauses can also give you time to collect your thoughts, making your delivery smoother and more confident. One of the best examples of the power of pause comes from Martin Luther King Jr. His pauses during his "I Have a Dream" speech created weight and significance, especially when he paused before delivering the most famous part of his speech. The silence before his next words created a dramatic effect that made his message even more powerful. Another benefit of pausing is that it can help you appear more confident and in control. If you speak too quickly, it can come across as nervous or unprepared. On the other hand, a slight pause shows poise and assurance. As The Art of Public Speaking points out, taking a moment before speaking gives the impression that you're choosing your words carefully. Pauses also have a way of grabbing attention. If you suddenly stop speaking, people's curiosity spikes. They begin wondering why you've stopped. This creates a natural focus on you, and it can intensify the impact of what you say next. While a well-placed pause adds power to your speech, excessive silence can be awkward. The trick is to balance it. Too many pauses might make you seem unsure, while too few can make your speech feel rushed and overly scripted. Silence also helps when transitioning between points. A brief pause between two sections of your speech allows the audience to digest the information before you move on. It's like giving them space to think, which makes them more likely to remember what you've said. In short, silence is a tool many speakers overlook, but it can be just as important as your words. Use it wisely, and it can make your speech more engaging, more memorable, and more impactful. If you found these tips useful, be sure to subscribe for more insights on public speaking and personal development. With these strategies, your next speech could be your best yet.